Welcome to Stitchery Stories, where textile artists share their life in fabric and thread, inspiration, techniques, disasters and delights. And I'm Susan Reeks, enthusiastic embroiderer and textile art dabbler who also loves podcasting. So take a break and enjoy our light-hearted chat, and please share with your friends so they can enjoy it too. Hello and welcome today to our lovely guest, Sorrell Kerrison. Hi, Sorrell.
Hi, Sue.
It's lovely to speak to you today, Sorrell. And I've got a really interesting bio from Sorrell. She's got lots of strings to her bow. I'll bring the music analogy in there. So I grew up in North Wales, about 7 miles from the coast. I was surrounded by nature and had a very active childhood. However, on hitting my teens, I felt incredibly isolated, and because of family issues, I dove headlong into creative pursuits as a form of escapism. I practiced my guitar every day and carried it to and from school with me. I eventually left home to study film at the University of Salford. Being free to explore the city life, I joined bands and made art. Oh, sounds great, that. I moved to London in 2008 and worked in a bookshop whilst I supported myself in the pursuit of creating music and art. I co-opted a space in an old corner shop where we built a live and work space and allowed bands somewhere to crash after their gigs. That is how and where I met my husband. He was in a touring band and happened to be staying with his bandmates in our living space. I moved to Bristol to be with him shortly after meeting him, and I joined a new band in Bristol. As a creative, you're always looking for angles in which you can involve your creative passions. Being in bands meant that I could create posters and t-shirt designs, learning how to print and augment clothing. I've been embroidering on and off this whole time. I always return to working with textiles as I love that it's art that you can touch and wear. We moved to Liverpool in 2016. Our dog Pipe moved in with us, and we've been happily making sound and textiles and art and films from inside our little house. That's a lovely bio, and that's why I said you've got lots of different strings to your bow. And obviously today we're going to highlight mostly the textile art side of things. But I can see that creativity weaving through your life, and I'm sure you'll share lots of interesting stories with us, Sorrell.
Yes.
And before I forget, the best way to get in touch with Sorrell is that's through your website, isn't it, Sorrell?
Yes, there's a contacts page on my website, or you can DM me on my Instagram if you want. Sometimes I get a little bit inundated with private messages on Instagram, so probably through my website is the best way to make sure you get a response.
Brilliant. So that's sorrellkerrison.com, and it's Sorrell, it's SORRELLKERRISON. Lots of doubles in there.
Yes.
And of course, all of Sorrell's links will be in her episode of Stitchery Stories. So if you go to stitcherystories.com and find Sorrell Kerrison, you'll find all her details on there. Yeah, she's on Instagram at SorrellCK and Twitter at Sorrell Kerrison. So all those links will be there. Right, brilliant. So before we get further into your Stitchery story today, would you like to share with us, Sorrell, what you're working on and what's got you excited?
Sure. I finished a little while ago, but I was commissioned to create 4 portraits for Bolton Museum for their Egyptology wing refurbishment, and they're due to be unveiled at the end of this month. Ooh. So I'm really excited about that. I've been working on that. I was working on that for 7 months. I finished in April, but obviously these things carry over, and I've been giving myself a bit of space post extreme working conditions to get those done. They are part of the Bolton Museum collection now, and they will be unveiled on the 21st of September, but they'll be up for public viewing from the 22nd. So I'm really excited about seeing them in place.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. And so these are part of their permanent collection. It's not an exhibition. These portraits are part of their museum collection, and they are going to live permanently with the Egyptology stuff. I've said the wrong word, but you know what I mean. So that's correct, isn't it, Sorrell?
Yes, that's correct. I was commissioned directly from the museum to create the 4 portraits for their permanent collection. Right. So they'll be there to view as part of their collection, which is incredibly honoured to be able to do that with my work. Have pieces publicly available to view.
Yeah, I think it's really brilliant that firstly you applied, it was like a request, it was one of these kind of bid, request for bid type things.
Yes.
Yeah, so you applied for that. And were they looking for textile pieces, or was it just a generic, they were looking for portraits? What were they looking for?
Yeah, no, they weren't looking for textile work at all, really. The commission brief read as they were looking for basically like an oil painter or somebody with portraiture experience. And I just saw the opportunity because these are characters that were involved with the Egyptology collection. I know that Bolton has a very rich history to do with textiles and the transportation of calico over from Egypt and the Lancashire history of, fabric mills and sewing mills and cotton industry and all that. So I thought maybe if I take that angle, that would be applicable to them. So I also work on calico. I really like calico. So I made a bid, I made a brief, and I explained how I'd approach the work and how I felt that textile art would be more in keeping with the history of Bolton and would tie in with the Egyptology collection itself. Obviously, when you apply for bidding, you don't really expect to get anything, because you can't expect to get anything, because you'll just be devastated every time you don't. So and then I received a call from them, and I basically got all 4 portraits, and I was so pleased not only to be able to create the work, but that Bolton Museum themselves have been so forward thinking in choosing someone who was an embroidery artist, a textile artist, and not just using an oil painter or an acrylic, painter or an oil painter, essentially for the collection, which would be kind of the obvious choice, I guess. And I don't know who else applied for the commission, but they were really, really happy with my brief and how I wanted to approach it. And also because my work's incredibly expressionistic, I don't use normal colours.
Yes, I want to come back to the colour aspect in a minute. I've got some questions up my sleeve about that for you.
Yeah, I was just really, I was pleased, I was proud, and just really excited. I mean, I love doing portraiture and delving into people's history. And these 4 characters were so interesting. And it gave me a lot of food for thought, not just when I was creating, but just in my life, actually. It was really affecting.
That's really interesting. And I think a very bold move from the museum, as you say, in taking that leap and saying, hey, look, we've got somebody here who's going to produce something slightly different from what people would expect. And I think that's refreshing in itself, isn't it? So, hats off to you for putting that bid in and giving it a go. And how often do we see these opportunities and think, no, they won't want me. No, what am I doing that for? That self-talk gets in the way, doesn't it? So,
exactly.
So hats off for you, Sorrell, for giving that a go. Now, so I can see why you've been very excited about all of that. So how long has it taken you to produce these? Because there's 4 of them, isn't there, based on those historic people who were involved with the museum and the collection? And also, what kind of size are we talking about as well?
The pieces themselves are about 30 inches by 16 inches.
Right, so quite sizable for a hand-embroidered portrait then, times 4.
Yes, exactly. And so I had to be really strict with my time and project management. I received the notification I'd got the project in about August last year.
Right.
And then I took about a month doing sketches and to and froing with them. Because basically, when I had the meeting with them, I explained that because of the level of complexity that hand embroidery takes and because of the layering process, I can't really go back once I've started.
Yes.
You can pick to a certain degree, but I use a lot of weaving and layering processes to get the shading. And if they suddenly went, we don't like that, I'd have to start again rather than unpick.
Yes.
So they were really great in our meetings, and I was very clear with them with what I could create and the process. But also, I'd never really made anything this big,
right?
So it was still very new to me. So I spent about a month initially sketching and to and froing with them about whether they liked the sketches, whether they liked my ideas. And then once I kind of hit the nail on the head, I started, and I basically said to them, look, I will send you process pictures, but but the first 80 hours of the portrait will look kind of rubbish.
Yeah.
So don't be shocked.
Don't worry. Yeah.
Because it's a lot of layering, and even I have to remind myself that it's going to look kind of rubbish. I have to get over that barrier for, the first bit. I'm like, oh no, I don't know if I'm doing this right.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Wow.
How did I do it the first time?
Yeah.
And then, and because I'm quite, I call it jazzing. I basically like improv everything that I make. I don't write down or stick to a particular structure. I have a kind of a method, but I find my best work is when I just get to that state where I can see where it's going to go, and I just kind of go into like a weird kind of floating meditative state. So I'm almost not doing it.
Right.
That only really comes, after about 50 hours of work.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, I know where this is going. I can see it. I can see where it's going, and I just kind of separate myself from it, and I just make it.
Yeah, so you're definitely in the flow at that point.
Yes.
You can see it in your head, and you know where you're going with it. So yeah, that's fantastic. So to be chosen, therefore, by the museum to do those 4 pieces, you say, so that's an awful lot of intensive work for the rest of for this year. Then, Sorrell. So when did you kind of finish? So you said you got notification about August. So when did you actually finish the 4?
I finished in about April.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, I think it was about 7 months from start to finish, and I was working like 10-hour days. I think at one point I went on a little holiday, like a 3 or 4 day holiday, just a break. And it felt really weird not sewing actually at the same time. Because I love it. I'm not very good at sitting still. I'm not very good at doing one thing at a time. I like multitasking. And the benefit of embroidery is that I can be productive whilst watching a film or whilst listening to an audiobook. So I get 2 things out of it. I need to do more than one thing. And life's really too short to be doing one thing at a time. And I probably should learn to be more focused, I guess, but I feel my work benefits from me doing 2 or 3 things at the same time.
Well, I suppose if you go into that meditative, it's like almost an unconscious state, isn't it, really, of your fingers are doing it and you're, listening to something else. So, yeah. Yes. So, yeah, you're just trying to cram in lots of life, aren't you, Sorrell? That's the thing.
Yes, that's it. That's the thing.
So, given that you've been, so intensive with these, how did you kind of first get interested in embroidery and textile art? I know you're in the bio, you were saying, you're just a very creative person, and you've been doing T-shirts, and you've always come back to textiles and stuff. Is there any particular kind of aspect of earlier life where you got interested, that you thought you'd be doing this?
I basically did sewing and things in school. Our home economics and art department, not very supportive of anything that wasn't strictly curricular.
Yeah.
And
that's a familiar story. So,
yes,
yeah.
I bet it's not unique. And I always wanted to create art. I can't say it any more simple. It's really simplistic. I always wanted to create art. I felt most at home when I was pulling something apart and building it back up again. And that's in any form. I look at something and go, how is that done? I want to do that with everything. So my school, I did art GCSE and art A-level, and I just felt like my teacher was very unsupportive. Like one of my most formative experiences with art where I was really excited was coming across Francis Bacon for the first time.
Right.
Jenny Savile's cover for the Holy Bible by the Manic Street Preachers, a triptych called Strategy on the front, which is these odd-angled paintings of 3 obese women. And I just remember being like, I've never seen anything like that before. Like, in school, you were always like, oh, there's Hockney and there's Picasso and there's all, but it became so, they became so obvious to me. And I'm not trying to dilute all other art forms, but like just seeing something new, like I felt like I discovered Francis Bacon. I felt like I discovered Jenny Savile.
Right, so it really sparked off some new enthusiasm in you.
Yeah, new angles, new kind of grossness as well. I really loved that it didn't have to be beautiful, or it didn't have to look exactly like it should look, or and that just took over. And I remember all my artwork in school was just kind of frowned upon. So I didn't actually do art in school. I did film.
Yeah.
But the problem there was I did more of a like journalistic film course, but all my films were arty.
Right, yes.
I kept going down this route that was, I wanted to be creative and I wanted to be expressive, but it was a bit like, no, here's the rules. This is what you need to do.
Right, yes.
I've never been good at that. I mean, I'm not rebellious in the sense that I'm like, I hope I'm not an awful person, but like, I look at something and I kind of want to be half told how to do it, and then the other half I want to feel out
Just
how to do it myself.
do it yourself, yeah. So you haven't, as you say, you at university you did film and so on. So you haven't been through that almost traditional route that lots of people have, where they learn from the grandma and finished up doing a textiles degree, or whatever it is. So it's great, very different sort of background that you've got interested in, and used different levels of art to express what you're feeling at the times. Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. So what's got you into creating the portrait style? Because I've looked at work on your website and stuff. It's very much portrait now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated by people's faces, and how much of a story that just a singular shot and angle can speak to you.
Yeah.
I always do the eyes of the portrait first, because that's when I can see them.
Right, yes.
Finish the eyes and then go, oh, hello.
Because the blinds before that, yeah, and that makes a big difference, doesn't it, their eyes? Yeah, wow.
And I just feel like if I can get that right, then everything else can be messy, and it can be more expressive. But I think that I've always returned to portraits. I've always drawn portraits and painted, and I'm not really sure how it developed. I just remember that I always liked the tactility of textile work over everything else.
Yeah.
I was always augmenting clothing. I was always making band T-shirts, designing things, merch that we could sell so I could keep being a musician. And I didn't really think of it as art necessarily. I just thought it was a necessity to make money and carry on doing what I love doing. And then I made a couple of portraits, and then I was approached by Andrew Hung, who is a member of F expletive buttons.
Right.
And he was releasing a solo album, and he said, would you create a portrait of me for the cover of my album? And I thought, yeah, that's brilliant. That's amazing. And I didn't really realize or recognize what an opportunity that was until it was like everywhere.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I could do this.
Yeah.
Like, I could do this as a thing, But that's how my whole life has gone. Like, whenever I pick up something, somebody asks me to do something, and then I go, oh, I could do this. But this is the first time that I've stuck at something consistently and made a body of work, and I just kind of keep wanting to work and build on this skill set. Right. The first time that I felt like, oh, this is my path. This is to be a bit egomaniacal about it. This is my calling. This is how I feel most myself, making these portraits.
But that's a brilliant point to get to, though, as well, isn't it? Because so often people are struggling to find, what is your why? What is it? What is your passion? I live my life online marketing, all the rest of it. And you're constantly just hearing this. What's your why? What's your passion? Why are you doing it? This, that, and the other. And yes, it can sound overused. But when you are actually sitting and thinking about it, it's incredibly difficult. And lots of people say, well, I don't know what my why is. Well, you haven't found it then, have you? When you know, people say, when you know what it is, it's come to you. Like you've just said there, it came to you. Wow, I can do this. This is where I'm going to focus my efforts onto. It's a difficult process, and it's a time-consuming process. And I think it's a process that a lot of people just skate over the top of, and, oh, never mind, stuff that. I'll just keep on doing this, and I'll do that, and I'll do the other things. I think it's lovely how that's developed into that feeling of, yeah, I can do this, it can be a thing, and I love doing it.
Yeah, I can't imagine doing anything else now. I mean, as someone who wants to do everything all the time, I feel like, oh, I can do this one thing really, really well. And to have that is it feels like it feels really enlightening, and it feels like a burden's kind of been lifted, because I'm like, oh, I found the thing that I can do really well. Because everybody else around me has always been really, really good at something.
Right.
I've been like, oh, I can do loads. I'm like a jack of all trades. I was like, I can do loads of things, but not to fruition.
Yeah. What's the one? Yeah, brilliant. So as you've realised that this is your thing, then how, you mentioned before about when you were talking to the museum about, beware, at first it's going to look strange, etc., etc. So how have you evolved that technique? Obviously it has evolved, hasn't it? And why do you like doing it as well? What is it that it all fits together? What keeps you going with that particular style?
Well, I've learned a lot through embroidery as a medium. I love that it's not messy like paint. I do like getting my hands in paint and plaster and all those things, but it's something you can carry around with you.
Yes.
And you can be with wherever you are, whether it be in your living room or in a pub or in the car or whatever. And on the train, I often embroider when I'm traveling. And I used it essentially as a form of therapy. After my dad passed away in 2012, I had a lot of anxiety build up. I started having panic attacks. I started to not like being around people so much, and it was really difficult to know how to navigate the world.
Yeah.
And I tried to look into meditation as a format and CBT therapy as a format to try not to get swallowed by that feeling.
Right.
Because I found myself being unproductive as well, which is very unlike myself.
Yeah.
So I tried meditation. It didn't work. It didn't stick. I tried CBT and that quite worked. It was actually podcasts, listening to podcasts that really helped. I listened to podcasts to go to sleep. I just had somebody talking to me constantly. And I thought, rather than let my brain go over and over and over things that could have happened or should have happened, or how, I just thought I'll just learn. I'll put headphones on and I'll listen to other people talking. And embroidery then became like a thing that I did to keep my hands moving.
While you was listening, because you like doing the extra two things,
So I was able to make a little bubble for myself where I was using my hands and I was learning and I was listening. I had headphones on, and I was able to create this new little world for myself where I was creating and absorbing and creating. So it's like an input-output situation.
Yeah.
And the whole point of meditation is that it's like listening to your breathing in, listening to your breathing out, and noticing that. And I couldn't quite get there. So that was my form of meditation. And then over time, I've actually developed my ability to meditate. And that's really fed back into my artwork. So I'm less headphone based now. I try to be social. I'm quite an insular person in lots of ways, so I'm quite introverted. But I just keep coming back to. I just kept coming back to textiles and embroidery, and also it's a way of like expressing. Well, I have like synesthesia, which I think a lot of creative artists probably have. I'm not sure how unique that is particularly, but I remember being in primary school and I used to run the little library. That's how isolating I like to be, not playing with the kids, but I like running the library. And I remember reading a book that was way out of my remit. And I think it was an adult book that had got into primary school, and it was talking about hallucinations and all these things. And I ended up talking to my primary teacher about ocular hallucinations, and she was saying, some people don't see things the same as we do, like colour blindness. And I was trying to explain to her that sometimes I saw different colours, and they assumed that was because I was kind of colourblind.
Oh, right, yeah.
But actually, it isn't. It's, as I later understood, it's like a synesthesia. Like people give off like a shape and colour, style, and a sound sometimes to me.
Yeah.
There's certain feelings that I get from memories, and people leave like an imprint. And so I've always tried to use that to put back into my creative work.
Right.
And embroidery seemed like it just seemed natural. It just seemed normal to know, these are the colours I'm going to use. This is how it's going to work. And it seemed to just like a Venn diagram of all the things that are me, like come to one thing that I really love. And just touch. Like I really hate being in museums and you can't touch anything. And I really tried. I was like with Bolton Museum, I was like, please, can people touch my things? And they were like, no, not really, because they're part of the collection. And I was like,
they'll get ruined.
But I just really because I want to touch everybody else's things, and I have to put my hands in my pockets when I go into museums.
So it's really interesting how you're saying about people give off a colour. So this presumably then is why the style in which you do the portraits, and you were saying about almost the woven aspects and layering and all the rest of it, how that's developed, plus the interesting use of colour. And when people see the portraits, there's blues and greens and all sorts of different colours in there that are unexpected when you're first thinking about a portrait. So that's where it's come from then, obviously, your ability to find or see these different colours that you see. Yeah, that's absolutely fascinating. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, lots of once I knew the word for it, because obviously when you have it, you don't know. I mean, it's never been a problem for me particularly. It's not like I see red as a different colour, but red to me gives off certain vibes. And I guess the best way to describe it is, at Christmas, you've got a certain green, you've got like a forest green, and you've got a certain red, and then those colours together create like a certain vibe, and that creates Christmas.
They mean Christmas, yeah. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah,
I've got that for everything.
Right, brilliant.
So it's constant. Like when I saw you on the video, you gave off this kind of like pale yellow with like a periwinkle colour.
Yellow? Gosh, I'm so not yellow. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. But it's not necessarily your favourite colour, but like there was like a vibrancy. And that's kind of what I feed into, is usually one colour that comes out.
Wow.
And then I kind of go from there. And yeah, it's hard to describe, and it sounds really hippy dippy, but sometimes you just got to go with what you've got.
Yeah, no, and I think that's the essence of your work. Now, we could talk about this all day. Moving on to the way in which you've done your art and these portraits, am I right in saying that this is definitely the high point so far of your textile art and embroidery career, Sorrell?
I mean, the Bolton Museum thing. I mean, to be in a collection at a museum at this stage in art and creative career is just phenomenal. And I hope there's another up from here. But at the moment, I'll take it. It's very exciting. I can't wait to see them in place.
Yeah. So is there a kind of a grand unveiling, isn't there, did you say?
Yes, there's like an unveiling on the 21st, but then the public can go and see the pieces as part of it on the 22nd.
Yeah, that absolutely is a high point. And we've talked quite a lot about those pieces. So I was just wondering, I normally follow up with the high point thing of if you've got any usually quite funny stories of when you think something didn't go quite as planned and, was possibly even described as a bit of a disaster. And what did you learn from that experience? Have you got anything to amuse us with today, Sorrell, on that? Or educate us?
Well, I guess like everything before this work's been disastrous in the sense that I've never really stuck at anything. Well, no, that's not correct. I mean, I've finished albums, I've written with bands, I've finished, I finished products and things, but home stuff, things that I do that I love, don't often get finished, or they didn't often get finished. No. Maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, I made a promise to myself. I think it was a New Year's resolution, but I definitely remember writing it down because I have a book where I keep any kind of thing that I'm like, no, I'm never going to do that again, or I'm going to do this. And just so that I have culpability to myself. And I basically said, I can't not finish things anymore. Like, so for instance, I can't have a pile of books that I haven't finished reading. So my rule is that if I get to page 21 of a book and I've decided that it's interesting enough to carry on with, I have to finish it and I'm not allowed to pick up another book. Brilliant. Whereas if I get to page 21 and I'm not interested, I've got to put it down and say I'm not going to finish that book, or I can come at it again another period of time. Yeah. But I love the library, so that's been really great for that because obviously I can just keep taking books back and
it didn't pass the page 21 test. That's a fascinating way of looking at. So as you've then created these rules for yourself that you are going to finish things. Yeah, so it's interesting that you've brought that up under the kind of disaster thing, but really it's been a very positive and I suppose quite a freeing kind of feeling, is it? That you've now turned that corner and decide, this is it, I finish things now.
Well, I remember watching this. Do you know Armando Iannucci? He's a comedy writer.
No.
He's excellent. You should look him up. Anyway, he wrote a lot of things with Chris Morris. And I remember watching a sketch that he did that was really funny about middle-aged men and the idea that they went to a middle-aged home for middle-aged men. And the woman in the sketch says, there is not now anyone in this room that will ever be an astronaut. And I thought that was so funny because it's like the idea of like, you can't. You're not going to get. Yeah, it's done. And I thought, that's hilarious. And then I was like, but that applies to so many things to do with creativity or just life. What you want to pick up and what you want to put down. And as a person who wants to do everything all the time, and it's been really great trying lots of things. But I'm 35 now, and I have to go. I'm never going to skateboard.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be a windsurfer. I mean, I'd probably try, but I'm never going to be a surfer.
I'm not going to be a professional windsurfer now. Yeah,
exactly.
I can confidently say that at the age of 53, I'm not going to be a professional windsurfer, stroke skateboarder, stroke extreme sports enthusiast. I know that because I'm 53. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, but I think it doesn't mean you can't try.
No, you can go and do them just for a laugh, can't you? But I'm not going to earn my living being a professional whatever. Yeah.
No, but I think there was something freeing because basically I came across lots of people who were like, oh, you're in a band. I'd love to do that. And I'm like, cool, go and be in a band then.
Go and do it, yeah.
And like, I didn't understand I'd love to write, people obviously, the obvious one is I'd love to write a book or I'd love to be an artist. And I'm like, well, no one's stopping you. Like, I'd love to be a lawyer isn't really, like, there are reasons why I couldn't be a lawyer and things that I have to do. But the good thing about creativity is that it's available to everyone all the time.
Yeah.
And there isn't a reason to not do it. And I think the thing that was freeing for me was to start saying, oh, these are the things I'm not going to do. Mm-hmm. Because I'm obstinate and I like to do the opposite of what people say. So when people were saying to me, oh, I'd love to do that, I'm like, why aren't you going to do it? It shouldn't be a negative thing.
Yeah.
To say, this is where my life has gone so far and I'm never going to be an astronaut. And that is kind of sad. But at the same time, I'm at peace with that. But these are the things that I am going to do in place of being an astronaut.
Brilliant. And these are the things I'm going to do and I'm going to finish them. So in that case then, I don't suppose you've got any UFOs lurking around in cupboards, have you? Because you finished everything now, Sorrell.
Not anymore, which is really crazy. It's quite strange. My studio is relatively tidy. I know where everything is roughly. Yeah, it's been definitely like a change into my 30s of my behaviour and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I just saw these people with bodies of work. My main enthusiasm for people is my main inspiration is looking at people who are in the 80s and 90s who are still creating, who are still, they haven't given up or their work was in their 20s. Yeah. And it's like, why would you stop? So I wanted to see, I basically found these people and then worked backwards through their life and went, oh, it was at this point they went, I'm going to create a body of work or I'm going to be focused. And I thought, right, it's that Einstein quote, isn't it? I can never quote it correctly, but it's like the definition of madness is to repeat the same thing over and over again and expect a different outcome. So I thought, right, well, instead of repeating the same thing, why don't I just Louise Bourgeois is amazing, and her work and body of work is so expansive. Why don't I work backwards through her life and figure out at what point that she was like, this is what I do now?
Yeah.
Because there's basically my 20s were an experimental phase to figure out what I was good at and what I enjoyed and what made me feel passionate. And I feel that really fired up to find something that I'm like, oh, I'm really good at this. I'm going to do this. So, I think everybody could learn from the much older generations because everybody looks for the contemporaries. And I think that's a mistake.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, say, tracking back and to find where was their turning point, their tipping point. At what point did they make that conscious decision or, moved forward with an idea and kept on going? Yeah. So I love how you've spent that time really just thinking about you and your art and your creativity and your life, and it's all woven together. And you've taken that path and there we are, you've got that commission and there will be an up from there.
I'm a positive person.
There's so much we can do, so much things we can do. Mm-hmm. What I was just wondering about, therefore, is since you have been so very busy, what have you got up your sleeve? What kind of plans and projects? Have you got anything to share with us? Or are you just going to have a rest now, Sorrell, and build on the portraits and give your brain and your hands a bit of a rest for a while?
Yeah, I always say I'm going to have a rest and then I never do.
That's not going to happen, is it?
My rest is doing another form of art.
Yeah.
I've been painting a bit more acrylic painting. I'm not very good at, I think the reason embroidery always becomes a thing for me is because with painting, I always just want to finish it now, and you can't do that with embroidery. It's like enforced patience.
Yes, I love that. Enforced patience, marvellous.
Yeah, it slows my process down so much that I can't. And with acrylic paintings or just paintings in general, I'm very fast and it doesn't ever come out the way I wanted it to. Particularly, I draw with biro and felt tip. I'm not fancy with my drawings and things, but yeah, I think I've just been doing a lot of that. I've been doing a lot of regular drawing practice every day just to try and get fast things out, because doing 4 portraits, and then I finished a portrait of Grace and Perry as Claire
right
a couple of months ago, which I'm due to stretch, it's not been stretched out onto canvas, but you can see my piece on my Instagram. But yeah, I've got some ideas. I've always got ideas.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was saying to you before that I don't understand boredom as a thing. I'm like, what is that word? I feel like a foreigner just like trying to discover what a word, how do you say that? Boredom?
Yeah, boredom. What on earth is boredom? I know.
Yeah. But I'm building a Patreon page at the moment so that
that's interesting.
See my work, and basically, because I've applied for commissions, it takes up a lot of time applying for bidding commissions and things. And with textile art, you're not always going to get the right thing. Because Bolton Museum are so forward thinking doesn't mean that other places are going to be.
Yes,
but it doesn't mean that I have to stop making work either, because I want to push, not as a one-woman crusade, because lots of amazing artists like Casey Savaglia are doing it, and they're creating these amazing embroidered works that cross the boundary between craft and fine art. And I hate that embroidery keeps getting diluted into this idea that it's just decorative and it's just women's art. And and I want to keep working, and I want to keep pushing the boundary of working with embroidery and textile art. So in order to do that, I thought it would be best to start up a Patreon page so that people who could see my work and enjoyed it could fund it through small amounts every month.
Yeah.
And it could keep pushing it forward. So at the moment that's been built, and my new project ideas they're not quite ready to come out, but if you look at my website, they'll be up in October, November, after the unveiling.
Right. So you've got lots of ideas going there, and interesting to say about a Patreon page as well. So and that can work incredibly well for people as well. I know people set them up for their podcasts as well. I was wondering whether to do one for that.
You should, yeah.
Another thing on the list of things to investigate, isn't it? So,
yeah.
Brilliant. So basically we need to keep an eye on your website and follow you on Instagram, because you've always got lots of interesting things going on there as well. Keep up with your future plans and projects, and just give those hands a bit of a rest after all that slow stitching. They'll be aching like mad. You're going to do your music for a while. Brilliant. Well, Sorrell, it's been absolutely fascinating speaking to you. I am so pleased that we connected. The way in which you look at your art and the different ideas you've got and how they express themselves in, as you say, those portraits, and I think those are very much a launch pad now, not the summit. They're the starting point for you. Absolutely wonderful speaking to you. Really, really great, and I'm sure everybody's found some really inspiring bits and pieces out of our chat today as well. So remember, you can find Sorrell on sorrellkerrison.com. All of Sorrell's links will be on the episode for her on stitcherystories.com. And with that, I say thank you very much, Sorrell. It's been brilliant speaking to you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thanks for interviewing everything. It's really nice to meet you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Bye.
See you.
If you liked this episode and want to hear more, then please join the Stitchery Stories fan club so you can get an email when a new episode is released. It's a quick and easy way of listening and of keeping up with any news and offers from our lovely guests. Please visit stitcherystories.com to join the fan club. Of course, if you have iTunes, then subscribe there to automatically get new episodes, and why not leave us a review and rating whilst you are there. So that is the end of our Stitchery story for today. So keep stitching, keep smiling, and keep creating your very own Stitchery stories.